DC Comics has had a lot of characters that have had a lot of reboots and have had a lot of live-action appearances, and the recent release of The Batman got me thinking of what are the best versions of all these characters in live-action, and how cool would it be if all those versions were to be in the same continuity. Basically, what would be the ultimate live-action Justice League if all of the best live-action versions of these characters all existed together? And that's basically what I'm going to look at in this video. In this video, I'll be going over every single member of the Justice League ever. Keep in mind, most of them either have never appeared in live action or have only ever had one appearance, so it's not going to be as long as you would expect. But there are a good amount of them that have had at least 2 versions of the character, and then there are characters like Batman who've had like 10, and I'll be going over who my favorite version of those characters are in live action, and then we'll basically see what all those characters together would look like in one continuity, because that is something that Marvel kind of has, but DC doesn't, and it would be cool to see what that would look like. So let's start with the founding members of the Justice League, and I'll be going over basically every single member that was ever a member in the comics. So let's start with the founding members, starting with Batman, the character who definitely had the most reboots over the years. Before I start though, I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting me on Patreon. If you want to support me on Patreon, link will be in the description down below. It's just to generally support me, but also you get videos earlier than usual. This video, for instance, the Patreon viewers will probably see it like a couple days, even a full week early. So if you want something like that, or you just want to generally support me, link will be in the description down below. With that in mind, let's begin the video. Over the years, Bruce Wayne or Batman have been portrayed by 13 different actors, and that doesn't even include the actors who portrayed him when he was a kid, with one exception. So if you were to include that, it would probably be like 20 to 30 different actors, because basically every single interpretation of Batman has the death of the Wayne scene, so you do have an actor as a kid. The actors who played him as an adult, however, are Lewis Wilson, Robert Lowry, Adam West, Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Christian Bale, David Mazouz, who technically played him when he was a kid, but he was the main version of Bruce Wayne on that show, so I included him anyway, Ben Affleck, Ian Glenn, who is personally my least favorite version of Bruce Wayne ever. They basically cast an actor who is much better suited for Alfred. You could hear his British accent, he's way too old, it's kind of embarrassing. Then there's Kevin Conroy, who's probably the most iconic Batman actor ever, but not in live action. He played him in live action in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that definitely wasn't the greatest live action portrayal of the character. But if we're talking about actors in general, Kevin Conroy would probably win. Then there is Warren Christie on Batwoman, and finally, my personal favorite, the newest one, Robert Pattinson, who I think embodies the character the best, has the coolest costume, has the most Batman-y movie, and I think that he deserves to be considered the best live-action Batman ever. I'm really excited to see more of the character. Superman is second only to Batman in terms of how many actors have played him. The actors who played him are Kirk Alyn, George Reeves, Christopher Reeve, who is considered like the most iconic portrayal ever, but I think his portrayal, or those movies at least, are a bit outdated, definitely good for the time, but I don't think it can be considered the best version of Superman ever anymore. Then there's John Newton, Gerard Christopher, Dean Cain, Tom Welling, Brandon Routh, who had a huge resurgence in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I could definitely see why somebody would consider him the best version of Superman, but he's actually not my personal favorite. Henry Cavill is also not my personal favorite. He didn't really have the best Superman role. I think the actor could definitely do a good job with better material, but I don't really think Zack Snyder understands the character as much as he thinks he does. But then there is my personal favorite, who, much like Batman, is also the newest one, which might be a returning trend, and that's Tyler Hoechlin as Clark Kent, aka Superman, on Supergirl and Superman and Lois. I think he's just the full package for Superman. He portrays Clark Kent perfectly, he portrays Superman perfectly, he's badass, he's got a cool costume, he's a part of the best live-action Superman thing or media ever, which is Superman and Lois. Plus, he has the best live-action Lois beside him, which is Elizabeth Tulloch. I personally think that Tyler Hoechlin is the best version of Superman. I will say, however, Brandon Routh is a close second. Wonder Woman definitely hasn't been portrayed by as many people as the other two members of the Trinity, and I don't think there's as many arguments about who the best one is. There's Linda Harrison, Kathy Lee Crosby, Linda Carter, and Adriana Padalecki, but I think the best one is pretty obviously Gal Gadot from the DC Extended Universe. The Wonder Woman movie alone is the best live-action Wonder Woman thing that's ever been made, and she was one of the best parts of both Justice League movies, and probably the single best part of the Batman vs. Superman movie. The only part that I think that they kind of of nailed. Everything else had a lot of problems and weren't the quintessential versions of those characters, but Wonder Woman kinda was. So I think Gal Gadot definitely deserves to be considered the best version of the character. Moving on to Barry Allen, aka The Flash, he definitely has more competition for him than Wonder Woman did, as there's been several different live-action portrayals of the character in just the last couple of years. Beginning with Rod Hayes from the Legend of the Superheroes, the first live-action portrayal of the character, but not being considered for this conversation. Then there's John Wesley Shipp from the 1990s show and the Elseworlds / Crisis on Infinite Earths crossovers, in the latter of which he was pretty cool. Then there's Kenny Johnston from the Justice League of America pilot, also not being considered for this conversation. Grant Gustin from the Arrowverse, and Ezra Miller from the DCEU. Those last two are probably the front runners for this conversation. The fact is, though, I don't really love Ezra Miller in the role. I think that he was miscast. He's pretty weird. He doesn't look like the character. That being said, though, he has easily the coolest scene in the Justice League movie, or at least the Zack Snyder Justice League movie. So in terms of portraying his powers, Ezra Miller probably did it the best. That being said, though, while his powers are a lot less consistent, Grant Gustin has also had just as many good feats as Ezra Miller, and has had some pretty awesome speedster moments. The problem with Grant Gustin is that he's been way too oversaturated as the character. He has 8 seasons to his name, plus crossovers. He definitely has had a lot of appearances, maybe even too many, to the point where his speed is inconsistent, his character is inconsistent. However, I think that in general, especially in the early seasons of The Flash, he was easily the best version of the character we've had on screen. He nailed a lot of aspects of the character. Right now, he has easily the best Flash costume that we've seen on screen as well. So I think I'm going to give it to Grant Gustin, but I do think that they can do a little bit better if they just make him more consistent, and that's really all you need. Surprisingly enough, Hal Jordan, aka the Green Lantern, has had by far the least amount of appearances out of any of the original founding members of the Justice League, only appearing twice, and one of them barely counts. That's the Howard Murphy version of the character from Legends of the Superheroes. The only one that really counts is Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan in 2011. And that's really it, and it doesn't seem like there's any plans for him to appear in the future. There was supposed to be a Green Lantern in Zack Snyder's Justice League, but that was going to be Jon Stewart. There's a Green Lantern HBO Max show coming out in the next couple of years, but that seems to be focusing on Guy Gardner and Alan Scott, and probably other lesser known versions of Green Lantern or human Green Lanterns, and not Hal Jordan, so he's easily the least appearing character from the founding members. And really, I have no choice but to say Ryan Reynolds is the best live-action version of the character. He wasn't bad, he was just in a bad movie. They definitely could have done a lot more or better with the character, but in terms of a live-action Hal Jordan, we definitely have not had a great one yet. Aquaman has been portrayed by Alan Ritchson in Smallville, Justin Hartley in the Aquaman pilot, and easily the best version of the character, Jason Momoa, from the DC Extended Universe, appearing in Batman vs. Superman, Justice League, Aquaman, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and the upcoming Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I really like this version of the character. I think Jason Momoa does a really good job with the role. They do a good job at making him really badass. And Aquaman, despite not being the most beloved movie ever, I really liked it. The visuals, the music, I think like the moment where he walks out of the waterfall is really, really badass. So yeah, I think this is a very good live action version of the character, and even if there was another good version, which there isn't, this one would probably be considered the best. Martian Manhunter has suffered from being a CGI character. The fact that he cost a lot of money just to look like the Martian Manhunter. In the Justice League of America pilot, he was mostly prosthetics and it looked bad. He was played by David Ogden Stiers, and he's not being considered at all for the best version of the character. On Smallville, they just didn't even try. He was just in human form the entire time, except for like one small scene as far as I know. On Supergirl, he has had a good amount of appearances as a CGI form, but the 22 episode long seasons that they had prevented them from using him effectively. He was in his human form quite a bit, especially in the later seasons. And finally, there's Henry Lennox in Zack Snyder's Justice League, but we really only see 2 scenes of him, and all he does is speak. There's never been a perfect portrayal of the Martian Manhunter, but I think David Haywood as the character, when he is in his CGI form, is actually pretty great. The problem is that he isn't in his CGI form as much as he should be for budgetary reasons, but when he is, he could be a pretty awesome character, especially in the early seasons where they had either a bigger budget or they tried more. So David Haywood, the best version of Martian Manhunter. So let's take a quick break in the video to look at what these 7 versions of the Justice League members could look like as the founding members of the Justice League, and here it is. And I think it looks pretty awesome. I think it looks a lot better than the lineup from the Justice League movie or any other live-action Justice League or Justice League-esque team-up that we've seen, because these are the 7 founding members and the best possible versions of all of them, except for maybe Green Lantern because it's the only one that they ever did. But not only does this look awesome, but it's also something that they could definitely just do right now in terms of the actors' ages. You got Grant Gustin at 32 as the youngest. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are all between 34 and 36. Then you have Ryan Reynolds and Aquaman, or Jason Momoa, from 42 to 46. And then the only one who's a lot older is Martian Manhunter's actor David Haywood at 56. But he's not an actor who has to be the same age as the rest. He's perfectly fine as that age. But in terms of ages, the actors are it's all a possibility. Basically, all of them except for Ryan Reynolds and David Haywood are currently active as these superheroes. And while this is something that's not possible in the slightest, just looking at it, it's a huge shame because we did have the ultimate founding members of the Avengers and then an ultimate Avengers team, but Justice League we never really had. So this would have been awesome, but you know, it's never gonna happen. But that's not the end of this video. Let's move on from the founding members to the initial recruitments to the Justice League all the way back in the 60s, starting with the first recruit, Green Arrow. Much like Green Lantern, Green Arrow has only ever been portrayed by 2 different actors, the first of which was Justin Hartley on Smallville, and the second of which is Stephen Amell on Arrow. The Stephen Amell version is easily the winner here. He's the only version of Green Arrow that could potentially have an entire universe, and kind of also multiverse, named after him, being the Arrowverse. I think that, yes, he is a departure from the comics a bit. He's a lot darker, not as jokey, a lot more Batman-esque. But I still think that he's a pretty great version of the character, even if he is a bit different from the comics. I think that he's really badass. Stephen Amell was a really good actor at times, and yeah, there are things that I wish they didn't change, but I do think that he's a lot better than Justin Hartley, and while there could be a more comic-accurate version of Green Arrow that could potentially be better, for right now, he was pretty great, and he is definitely the best live-action version of Green Arrow, who, like I said, had an entire universe named after him. Continuing the Arrowverse streak is Ray Palmer, aka the Atom, and there isn't really much competition here. Brandon Routh is easily the best version of the character. The only other one is John Kassir in the Justice League of America pilot, and like I said, not at all competition. Again, there are departures here for the fact that he has more of an Iron Man suit than an Ant-Man suit, but he's a pretty good version of the character, and he definitely has his moments. Hawkman is a bit of a curious case because I think that the best version of the character hasn't debuted yet and will debut in Black Adam, played by Aldous Hodge. It's just the fact that there hasn't really been a good version of Hawkman, and this one looks pretty awesome. He looks cool. It's the first time that Hawkman has ever appeared in big budget, and he has a pretty cool design. So I think that he's probably going to be the best. For now, it's probably the one from Smallville, played by Michael Shanks, or the one from Legends of Tomorrow, played by Falk Henschel. Neither of them were really all that great. There's also Bill Knuckles from Legends of the Superheroes. There's never really been a good version of Hawkman on screen, and I think Aldous Hodge will be the first one who's pretty great. So for now, let's just say the one from Smallville, but it's definitely going to be the one from Black Adam. Black Canary, compared to Green Arrow, has had a lot of appearances, which is surprising, the fact that she's appeared so much more than Green Arrow and been portrayed by so many more actresses. But maybe it shouldn't be surprising because she was kind of portrayed by 3 different actresses on Arrow alone, although Katie Lotz is not being included because she's not Dinah Drake or Dinah Lance, she's Sarah Lance, a different character. But the actresses who played Black Canary are Danuta on Legends of the Superheroes, not really being considered here. There's also Rachel Scarston from the Birds of Prey TV show, Elena Huffman from Smallville, Katie Cassidy from Arrow, who played kind of 2 different versions of the character, one from Earth 1 and one from Earth 2. Then there's Juliana Harkavy, who played the Dinah Drake version, and finally Journey Smollett-Bell from Birds of Prey. This was a bit hard to choose because I don't know if I can include like the 2 Katie Cassidy versions of the character separately, because if I did, then the Earth 2 version of the character, specifically from the 8th season, would easily be the winner here. That was definitely the season that portrayed Black Canary the best, and better than any other live action portrayal ever. If I have to include not only like every version of that character together, every appearance of that character together, plus the Earth 1 version, then I think that she probably wouldn't win, and it would maybe even be the Juliana Harkavy version of a character, because she's just a little bit more comic accurate, and I always liked her, even though she was a bit controversial. But personally, I think that the best live-action portrayal of the character ever was in Season 8 of Arrow, played by Katie Cassidy, so I'm going with that. After Black Canary are two members of the Justice League who have only ever appeared in live action once, played by one actor. There's the Phantom Stranger, played by Macon Blair on Swamp Thing, and Ralph Dibny, aka the Elongated Man, who was played by Hartley Sawyer on The Flash, the latter of which I think was, even in his first live action appearance, kind of the quintessential version of the character, and a huge shame that he's been fired from the show, because there is still a lot of things they could have done with him. If I were to have like an ultimate live action Justice League, and that Justice League were to include the Elongated Man, then Hartley Sawyer would be the actor I would choose for that role. Red Tornado has only ever been played by one actor, that being Ido Goldberg, but Ido played two different versions of the character, one from Earth 38 where he was actually physically there, he had a costume and makeup and he looked like Red Tornado even though it didn't look very good, and then there was in Crisis on Earth X and in the series finale of Supergirl where he was CGI, which is a much better design for him, but neither of them were very good versions of the character because they were both portrayed as mute villains instead of these complex and obviously speaking superheroes that Red Tornado should be. So while I think that the design from Red Tornado from Crisis on Earth X was pretty great, this character has never been portrayed well in live action. Jon Stewart, much like Hal Jordan, hasn't really had much luck in live action. He's only ever been portrayed once, and that's by Wayne T. Carr. And that was footage that was never released. They recently released a picture, and that's definitely the best Green Lantern design we've gotten. But the fact is, there's no footage released, so the character doesn't really exist, meaning that the only live-action portrayal of Jon Stewart ever wasn't even Jon Stewart, it was John Diggle, who is a character that's not only very similar to Jon Stewart, and thus was theorized to maybe be this universe's version of the character, but then they really delved into that theory. They gave him a glowing green item from space, officially confirmed to be a Green Lantern ring. 2 years later, he still hasn't worn it, but that is something. Plus, they gave him a stepfather named Roy Stewart, who by the end of his appearance, John kind of saw as his actual father, meaning that him changing his name to Jon Stewart wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world, although it's probably something that will never happen. So yeah, this is technically the best version of Jon Stewart on screen, but if Wayne T. Carr were to actually appear, he would be given priority as like the only live-action Jon Stewart, because John Diggle for now is only considered that because there isn't really any other version that ever appeared. Hawkgirl, much like Hawkman, has never had a good live-action appearance. The problem for Hawkgirl is that she doesn't seem to be appearing in anything anytime soon. Hawkman's appearing in Black Adam, but Hawkgirl isn't. So for now, technically the best version of Hawkgirl is Kiara Renee from Legends of Tomorrow, and then there's also Sarah Bareilles from Smallville, but she didn't really have much of a role. So the best version of Hawkgirl ever is a very annoying character. This is a character that was not a good version of Hawkgirl at all. So hopefully we get a better live-action interpretation of the character sometime soon, maybe in some Black Adam sequel, or a Hawkman spin-off, JSA spin-off, something, because Hawkgirl definitely deserves better than this. Zatanna has only ever appeared once, played by Serinda Swan on Smallville, but there are a lot of Justice League Dark properties that are in development, so hopefully she makes another appearance sometime down the line, and I don't think it would be too difficult to replace this version of the character as the best version, because she really only appeared in one episode. The next character is Firestorm, the original one being the Ronnie Raymond and Martin Stein version, and while yeah, the best version of Ronnie Raymond is the only one ever, Robbie Amell, and the best version of Martin Stein is also the only one ever, Victor Garber, although that latter one will probably be a lot harder to replace as the best version. The fact is, the best version of Firestorm is not technically a duo from the comics. It's not Ronnie Raymond and Martin Stein, it's not Jason Rusch and Martin Stein, it's not Jason Rusch and Ronnie Raymond, it's Martin Stein and Jefferson Jackson, a character in the comics who was never Firestorm. So kind of separating these three, the best version of Ronnie Raymond is Robbie Amell, the best version of Martin Stein is Victor Garber, but the best version of Firestorm is played by Franz Drama and Victor Garber, playing Jefferson Jackson and Martin Stein. We then get to the Justice League Detroit recruits, starting with Commander Steele, or Steele, otherwise known as Hank Haywood, who technically has appeared in the Arrowverse as like the father of Citizen Steele / Steele, whatever he's usually called, Nate Haywood, who is also a character in the comics, who is this character's son, but that is not a version of the character who's ever been a member of the Justice League. It's this version, the Hank Haywood version, who is. But if I were to include that as the best version of the character, then it would be this old man. Instead, I'll just go with the Nate Haywood version on Legends of Tomorrow, played by Nick Zano, mostly because he is kind of an amalgamation of the Nate Haywood / Citizen Steele character and Hank Haywood / Steele. They are both the grandchildren of the original Commander Steele. Instead, here, one of them is the son and the other one is the grandson, and only the grandson is the hero. So he is kind of an amalgamation of both characters, and since one of those characters is a member of the Justice League, I think it's counted here. I think that it is valid for him to be included. Vixen has been played by two different actresses, although one of them technically never played Mari McCabe. There's Megalina Chinawok, who plays Mari McCabe in the Arrowverse, and Macy Richardson Sellers, who also plays Vixen in the Arrowverse, but it's not Mari, it's her grandmother, Amaya Gile, who is technically a completely different character, and was a member of the JSA on the show. Out of the two, I don't really have an opinion about which one is better, but just the fact that Megalina Chinawok plays Mari, and not this weird original character who's the grandmother of Vixen, member of the JSA. It's a weird thing they did there. They wanted to use Mari McCabe, but the actress wasn't available, so they just did that. For that reason, not alone, but for all those reasons, Megalina Chinawok is a bit better, and technically the best live-action version of the character, although I don't think she's all that great either in live-action. They definitely can do better. Then we have three characters, all of whom have only ever appeared or been portrayed by one actor. There's Vibe, played by Carlos Valdez, who when he was good, but much like Aaron Gustin as Barry, he definitely was oversaturated and appeared too much to the point where in like season 5 of The Flash, he started becoming pretty annoying with his storylines. But then there's Gypsy, played by Jessica Kameko, also in the Arrowverse, and also a pretty good version of the character. And Ted Kord, aka the Blue Beetle, played by Sebastian Spence on Smallville. Not a good version of the character. He never suited up as Blue Beetle, and I'm hoping in the Blue Beetle movie that comes out next year, with Jaime Reyes as the main character, we get a better version of Ted Kord, because up until now, we haven't had the quintessential live-action Ted Kord, or Blue Beetle at all. So that's it for this video. I will make a second part going over all the recruits from where I stopped, which is basically the 1990s till the present day. And for now, though, we have 21 heroes, members of the Justice League, and the ultimate versions of those characters, or at least the best ones we've had so far, in this picture right here. A couple of notes: I included the Ronnie Raymond version of Firestorm instead of Jefferson Jackson in the end. I just decided that he's a better representation of Ronnie Raymond's Firestorm. Meanwhile, Jefferson Jackson is a lot better as the Jason Rush version. It just makes more sense. I also included the Wayne T. Carr version of Green Lantern, just because if I were to have an Ultimate Justice League and I could pick from any of the live-action versions, I definitely would pick that one, and not the David Ramsey John Diggle, because that's a bit more complicated. But that's really it. I also didn't include Phantom Stranger because he isn't much of a Justice League member really, and he never really suited up in Swamp Thing. Same goes for Ted Kord. While he is a Justice League member, he never suited up as Blue Beetle, so I didn't include him. That leaves us with 21 heroes, all of whom are included in this picture. But in the next video, this will get a lot bigger. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who's your favorite version of all these characters? Your favorite live-action portrayal of all the biggest DC heroes and Justice League members? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and sign up to my Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye.